Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Hub Underground. Matt Dolph here with Ty Anderson, as we are every single episode. You can, of course, get us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can get every episode at 985thesportshub.com and the Sports Hub app. We have finally fixed the technical difficulties on the audio side of the podcast. But, yes, we have. We are finally on all the platforms, Ty. We're getting 2, perhaps 3 people listening to our show now. But yeah, no, look, if you're listening on the audio side, but you prefer us on YouTube, go ahead, feel free to go flip over to YouTube. The episode will be up there for you. But if you're listening on audio, happy to have you. We're back up and running, and we're back and ready to talk some hockey. Ty, back from your break. I was at the first couple days of training camp. We got a couple of preseason games under our belt. The Bruins lineup possibly coming into picture here. So we got stuff to get to, Ty. How are you doing on this fine afternoon?
I am doing wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful as well. Going a million miles an hour. Got stuff to do, places to be, people to see. But I'm glad to be here with you at this very, very moment. So I want to start with last Thursday and Friday, the start of Bruins training camp, the 2 days that I was able to be there and cover the team. So there's not much to glean from the actual practices. You know, it was basic stuff. Even the guys all in the locker room were saying, look, we're not even like game planning or there's nothing like that. We're just getting our feet wet. They worked on the forecheck, like the basic hockey stuff. But to that point, it feels like this is going to be, the focus of the team is a lot of the basic hockey stuff. It's going to be a back to basics kind of season for them. That's especially considering with a first year head coach, but I feel like they're going to have to do all the basic things really well in order to win games. And so I'm glad that they got back to basics on the first day. And just watching and listening on the ice, Marco Sturm stood out because of his voice. He had a very loud, booming voice, and people talk about how direct he is, and it felt like he had command of things. And what I thought was different than what I saw from Jim Montgomery's training camp last year is that pretty much like every 10 minutes or maybe after like every drill, Sturm would bring the whole group in. They had 2 different groups, 2 different practices, but he would bring the whole group in to gather around, take a knee, and then confer. So it's like, all right, we're going to do the drill. Here's the evaluation. Here's what we're doing next. It felt like he had command out there. So that's that was good. Where it didn't feel like he had command was in the press conference after practice. Now, I'm just hoping this is just inexperience with being the guy at an NHL level press conference, especially with the fastidious Boston media asking all kinds of questions, trying to get all kinds of details. He was a little all over the place with his answers. And I know that part of it was they are asking him about, the lineup configurations. How's he going to configure the lines? Should we expect to mix it up a little bit? He basically said stuff to the effect of I don't know. I could do whatever I want. We could try this guy at this position. We could try him at set. We could try Zach at center. We could try him at wing. I don't know. We could put a speed line together. We could do anything. I like his attitude, but I just hope that sort of all over the place, scattered nature of how he was describing his methods and his approach and all that. I hope that wasn't a reflection of what it's going to be on the ice. I would hope on the ice it's going to be a little more buttoned up. They're all going to be on the same page and all that. To me, it's just potentially a small sign that the inexperience is going to shine through because we are talking about a first-year head coach. I think he has potential. I think he's the right kind of coach for what Don Sweeney wants, for what the organization wants, for what they have on the roster and their strengths, defense and goaltending in particular. I think he's a good fit, but I feel like the inexperience could come through at some point. So I don't know. What's your early impressions of Sturm?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that he's going to be a hard coach. I think as it relates to your point, I think so much of that has to do with both Sturm's personality, figuring out what you have, but also the general sort of flexibility of this lineup, right? I've kind of come into this problem here when I've tried to build out their lines. You have 6 different options at center. You got guys that are here. You got guys that can play wing and center. You got free agent additions. It might come down to who you're playing that night, what your lines are looking like. We could sit here. We did that podcast a little while ago where we're building our lines. We could have done 19 different versions of that, and they would have been like, yeah, that could be it. Like, you just don't know what you have here, right? And so I think there's some of that there. I also think that he's still trying to figure out, how certain guys can play together and how guys can't. A great example would be like, all right, like, we know that Matej Blumel can play both left and right wing. But something just happened.
The recording has resumed. We apologize
for
the. Speaking of technical difficulties, I spoke too soon saying we're past the technical difficulties, apparently.
Yeah.
So if you're watching on YouTube,
freedom of speech, huh? Were they trying to get me like they got Jimmy Kimmel? What the hell, man?
We just watched a cinematic masterpiece unfold for the last 30 seconds of this very podcast on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, we probably cleaned that up. That was a treat for the YouTube people. Just a high level production we got going on here, Ty.
Yeah, that's okay.
So apparently StreamYard was not a fan of you saying Matej Blumel could play either left or right wing.
Well, I mean, he can.
You want to just pick up where you left off there?
Yeah, like he can, right? And so what's best for him and what's best for your lineup complexion? Viktor Arvidsson is going to be in your top 6. So that would seem to indicate he's going to be your second line right wing. So, okay. So you kind of know, where Lindholm's going to be, where Pastrnak is going to be, where Arvidsson's going to be. And that's kind of it right now, at least in their top 6, like you really don't know. Like I project he's going to be left wing 1, but you don't know. Maybe they want to tinker there and say, can you drive your own line? Kind of like what we talked about last week, So like that's an option for them as well. And so I think that Sturm is kind of figuring out how can we don't have any talent coming over the hill just yet. James Hagen's going to play his year at BC and then probably jump to the pros if he has time late in the season this upcoming season. But this is what you have. So how do you squeeze the most out of that? And I think that's why, to your point, Sturm is more like, yeah, we can do lots of things. Not that they can, but they might have to because they have to bridge the gap of what they have offensively and what they lack offensively, to try to squeeze the most out of this roster right now.
Okay, that spin makes me feel a little bit better, Ty, because it felt like it just came off to me like he didn't really know what to do. It's just like,
well, I mean, he's, that was what 2 days into or 3 days into.
It might have been the first day. So
yeah,
like fair to him,
So he's had convos with these guys, but he hasn't been on the ice coaching them yet, and getting to pick their brains about, what they like, what they prefer. Like we talked to Nikita Zadorov on Labor Day, and Zadorov was like, oh, yeah, we've had phone conversations, but we haven't really talked nitty gritty yet. Then Pastrnak the next day said the same kind of thing. So like, the offseason, he was talking with these guys, but it wasn't like, where do you want to be? Where do you like playing?
But that's normal, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. It's the first-time head coach, and it's a first-year head coach, and he wasn't an assistant. He doesn't know many of these guys. He knows Mikey Eyssimont. He knows Viktor Arvidsson. He knows Korpisalo a little bit from LA, not a whole bunch, but like he knows these guys a touch. He doesn't know them all. So I think he's still trying to figure out what they like in order to help build out, the ideal roster for both the players and the coach.
So speaking of Mikey Eyssimont, he had more skill than I realized. Not that I'm not saying he's going to score a lot, but kind of showed it off in that game the other night against the Rangers. Look, I was only able to catch the third period of the Rangers game so far. I was just been busy. So
that's the only one you needed to watch, actually. So that actually kind of works out.
My question to you, Ty, is what is everybody so worried about? I mean, I don't know. They scored 3 times. They scored again in overtime to win. No, like what did you see over the first couple periods that had everyone up in arms?
Not quick thinking. Very, very correctable mistakes kind of happening. I'm talking turnovers on the power play. I'm talking, there was one sequence there where Johnny Beecher gets the puck right inside his own blue line. Got to be quicker. Held on to it, turned it over, goal in the back of the net. Like when you're a fourth liner and you're a D zone guy, you got to know what you're doing with it before you even get it, right? Just not quick enough on the draw there. Just kind of like, they're the mistakes that can burn you in the regular season and the mistakes that did burn them in the regular season last season. So that's what people were like kind of up in arms about. And Korpisalo battled back well. Kudos to him. I thought he really finished the game strong, but a little too many rebounds, a little too leaky. Trouble with the angles, perhaps. Whatever it was, like he did not have a good opening 30 minutes of that game. So you're watching that, and you're kind of thinking, wow, this is last year all over again right now, right? But you battle back, and you brought a Eyssimont, like you battled back with one of those guys that you brought in to help, quote unquote, drag you into the fight and to prevent you from being an easy out. And I know it's the preseason, but that's why that guy's here. Some big hits, some big goals, really pressuring New York every chance he got. I think that was a good sign. I don't care if it's preseason. Like that guy doing that is important. I think especially, he's going against Adam Fox. Not like he's going against, the Hartford Wolfpack's third pairing defensive unit right there. Like, no, he's outworking Adam Fox and forcing him to make bad decisions. Like, I like that. That's a good thing to see out of Eyssimont. And if he brings it every night, you're going to be a slightly better team because of it.
Speaking of last year all over again, or you could probably even say like the last 50 years, so they gave up goals within 2 minutes of scoring.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
What the hell? What the hell, Ty?
19 times they did that a year ago.
I thought this was going to be over with Jim Montgomery being out of here.
Yeah. Well, that's the last minute thing. Let's see how the last minute goals look. They actually did almost get one of their own. The Khusnutdinov game time goal came with like 1:02 left, not under a minute. So just beat getting one of your own there. But
so with the immediate answer goals, did you see anything that looked familiar, or was it just like an isolated?
No,
you think it was like an isolated thing.
Yeah, I think it's isolated. I think a lot of those a year ago were kind of isolated, to be honest with you. But it has happened now 3 times in this postseason, preseason, which is not great. You don't want that. So if you've given up 9 goals, right, and 3 of them have been response goals, that's 33% of your goals you're giving up right after you score. That's not a good ratio, right? So you want to get that number down. And this is kind of, I think, where you're finding out your identity guys, right? Your glue guys. I think that, one of the hallmarks of the Bruce Cassidy Bruins was that they would score a goal and he'd put out the Corrali, Achari, Nordstrom line because he goes, I know what I'm getting out of these guys, and they're going to carry momentum in a positive direction. I think you might have to find out who your glue line is, right? Who are those guys? And maybe you got to deploy them right after a goal to try to, keep the pressure on or keep the momentum going, in your direction. And that's something that Sturm talked about. Sturm talked about, the fourth line. What is the fourth line? The fourth line can't always score, but they got to provide energy, right? And they got to flip a game when it's going the wrong way. And so I think that's what he hopes for out of his fourth line. And so, Eyssimont should be a part of that fourth line. So there's a positive within that, right? That if he's part of that line, that glue guy line that you want to talk about, like that's a good thing, given the way that he played and responded in that game. One thing about Eyssimont that I did want to talk about real quick. So the Bruins are incorporating him on their penalty kill. He did not kill in Tampa. He did not kill in Seattle. This is another example of the Bruins finding a guy who they might look at and say, you weren't being utilized correctly. And now they're going to utilize him the right way. And he's going to become a better player for it. Cole Koepke didn't kill in Tampa. He wanted to, but he didn't. He comes here, becomes a good fourth line player for them, cashes in Winnipeg. They've been pretty good at finding guys that they think can kill penalties more than they have. And those players really rewarding them for that faith and that trust in their game.
Yeah, and I mean, no more Marchand, no more Coyle, no more Carlo. Like, they're really going to need to figure out those roles. Like, those are roles they're going to have to fill. And so, yeah, I like what I saw from Eyssimont. Like, I know that, like, he's not exactly the caliber of player people are hoping for the Bruins to sign, but for what he is, just him in a vacuum, like, I like what he brings to the table. I think fans will like him. So just like, let's use that as a jumping off point for the full lineup. Let's see, talk about how the lineup is sort of shaking out here. So I think Monday's practice lines, just looking at it here, between Group A and Group B, I feel like the top 2 lines from each of those groups feels like it could be the NHL lineup, at least close to it. Certainly the top 2 lines, the top 6 is what we've been saying for a while. Geeky, Lindholm, Pasternak, and then Zaka, Middlestat, Arvidsson. So that's your top 6. The bottom 6 is intriguing to me, especially the third line, which was the first line, I believe, in Group B on Monday. Marat, Khusnutdinov at left wing Fraser Minton at center, Tanner Jeannot at right wing. We know Jeannot is going to be on the NHL roster. Fourth line, Eyssimont, Sean Kuraly, Mark Kastelik. And so we know Mark Kastelik's going to be in the NHL lineup. Kuraly most likely too. So that feels like I like that as a fourth line. Like it feels like a good, NHL caliber fourth line there. So the third line is what really sticks out to me with Khusnutdinov and Minton, two guys that we talked about a lot, two guys that I feel maybe have the best chance of all the young players, the guys, under 23, 22 years old, whatever age range, like the youngest guys that have the best chance to actually make the roster and make a real impact. And so out of that group, then you got to talk about who's left out, right? So out of that group, on the outside looking in, Matej Poitras, Fabian Lysell, Johnny Beecher, Donzlish Millis, and Matej Blumel, who, let's see if YouTube kicks me off for mentioning his name, was not in that group that I just mentioned. And so, look, we'll see if any of those other guys end up, sneaking into the NHL roster, but it feels like those four lines are pretty close to what they're going to have. Like, what's your read on that as far as, especially the bottom six? Like, do you feel like it's sort of rounding into form, or do you feel like there's a couple of guys that are maybe on the outside looking in that could make a late push here? And do you have any guys that you feel like are sort of on the way down and might stay where they are on the outside?
Yeah. When it comes to Blumel, I think Blumel is kind of a lock to make this team now. I think after seeing him, seeing him play, seeing him practice, like it feels like they really like what they have here. And I think with Blumel, I think he's already the fourth best shot on their team. You didn't see it in the goal that he scores in New York, I know, but you saw it in the overtime. He's just absolutely blasting away these one-timers on the power play. Like, their best shots are probably Pastrnak, Geeky, Zacha, and then Blumel in that order. I would say those are your four best shooters you have up front. And this team is going to need those kind of guys. You're going to need those kind of shooters. And so I think that really helps a guy like Blumel over, say, a Lysell, who probably sees the ice a little bit better as a passer, but doesn't have that potent of a shot or that powerful of a shot. Same thing with a guy like Matt Poitras. If you want to play him on the wing, I don't think he has as powerful of a shot as Blumel. And so I think he's going to make the team. I do feel that way, barring something catastrophic here where he's committing ozone penalties and just produces nothing.
Where do you see him fitting in, though?
Middle six somewhere, either left wing or left wing on line 2 or left wing on line 3. Maybe right wing if he can play the off wing. He's been lined up there a little bit, so that's possible. And I've said before, but he has played there. He plays there on the power play, so he can do that if you want him to. He likes it because it opens him up for the one timer. But you sort of you look at where they are right now, and like they need all the offense they can get, man. So I just feel like Blumel and that shot, and especially because he chose Boston over Pittsburgh, and guys like David Pastrnak and Pavel Zacha are happy that he's here. Two of your veteran leaders, like you're not going to waive him. Like you're going to give him every chance you can to make the team, right? Like you want him to be found money for your team. Much like Morgan Geeky was found money for your team. Like if he can be that kind of guy, you're a better team for it. And so I expect them to give him every chance that they can for him to make the team. And so I think he's in right now. Interesting, I thought today at practice too. They mixed up a little bit. They had both Zacha and Middlestad playing center, kind of like what we talked about last week, where like you do move one of them down.
Yeah, Sturm, Zacha and Sturm was talking about early on how he likes him at center so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting configuration with Zacha second line center, Middlestad third line center, and that's where I feel Blumel could fit in. Is if you put him next to Middlestad on the third line. That was interesting. The other thing is Sturm did say he wants his third line to be able to play against the other team's first line. So I don't know if Blumel Middlestad is really a fit for that, but I don't know. Sorry. Yeah. Finish it.
No. I don't know that what we think their second line is actually going to be their second line in terms of deployment. You know what I mean? Like when you got guys that are good centermen, like Lindholm, like Kastelik, like Kuraly, like, yeah, they might be on your fourth and your first line respectively, but they might get used like a third line sometimes, against other teams' top lines just to win that matchup or survive that D zone draw, whatever the case may be. And so I don't know if they're going to have a line that's going to be, 70% ozone. I just don't know if they can afford it. Right. And so there's that part of it. No, it's just not. It's no good. No good. Melting the damn ozone.
The
No,
whales are dying, Ty.
But I do think that, like, if you go, another guy that I want to mention who I think did himself a lot of favors on Tuesday against the Rangers was Marat Khusnutdinov, a guy who is not on the bubble necessarily. Like, I think he makes this team, but what's his role? Is he a healthy scratch or is he in the lineup? Like that's kind of I think where he is as a bubble guy. I think a good game, good along the boards, good along the good battles. Had a takeaway or two, had a goal, had an assist. Like, that's a player that, again, I use the term found money. You get him for Justin Brazeau, who was not good in Minnesota. He was a second round pick. Khusnutdinov was a great player in the KHL. All right, can you pump him up here? Can you juice him up a little bit here and get his game going as a pro? And then you're like, where the hell this guy come from? And you're like, yeah, you won't believe it. We traded Justin Brazeau to get him. Like that's kind of where they are right now as a franchise. And so if those guys can reward you, you're going to feel better about your team. And you're going to say, look at, we got all these misfits here and we're building them up into something. And now you got to decide, do you trade them or keep them? But, if you got more of those players, those are more players than you had this time a year ago, right? And so that's kind of the name of the game, I think, when you're a rebuilder or a fringe rebuilder like the Boston Bruins are, where they want to be competitive, but they also realize they don't have a whole lot of solidified pieces beyond their top line right now.
Yeah, I do like that you mentioned the thing about deployment, because that's actually one thing that I did like that Sturm said, which is that he doesn't necessarily see it as like first line, second line, third line. Like, he looks at it in terms of what's your role. So it's like he might look at it as, we got a scoring line, we got our defensive line, we got our, our all situations line, and our checking line, like maybe something like that. And so ideally you have a good enough roster that you don't have to look at it that way. But I think a good smart coach can look at it that way, where he needs to sort of match it up certain ways, and he needs to look at the opponent and, deploy his lines according to the opponent, as opposed to just rolling the same lines no matter what the situation. Like, you got to play the matchups at some point. So I do like that about Sturm. Do you got any other leftover thoughts on the lineup? Anything fresh from the most recent practices that we haven't touched on?
Not necessarily.
Haven't touched on the defense.
No, and I think the defense can be a work in progress. I do think Jordan Harris is probably your in-house favorite right now for that seventh D spot, ahead of Michael Callahan and Victor Soderstrom. Yep. That's really all I got on the defense right now. Like that,
what about Lohrei McAvoy? That's been the pairing so far.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, that probably gives you the best balance. I would say. We've talked about that before. The
best balance throughout the lineup. You mean, not on that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you got a guy you can trust to create offense and play sound defense on all three pairings if you do it that way, right? Like, if you do it that way, and I think Sturm is like Cassidy in the sense that he looks at things as pairings up front, but I also think he applies on the back end where, all right, I got one offensive guy and I got one defensive guy. Like, here's who I'm going to lean on. And you got, like, some pairings, you got guys that can do both, right? Like, that top pairing can do both, but you're going to say, okay, if Lohrei goes, Charlie, you're hanging back right now. You are the last line of defense right now, And so, and I think of the three groupings, the three options that they have, I think Lohrei McAvoy has the most potential, right? Like,
most upside.
Yeah, and so I think that's, again, going back to where they are as a team right now, you're thinking upside. And if you can, like, Lohrei's going to make mistakes, but if you have your Norris caliber D to his right, you feel a little bit better about that than Andrew Peeke. Not a knock on Andrew Peeke, but it's just like you feel a little bit better knowing that you have a guy who was a top 5 Norris finisher a couple of years ago.
Sort of bolsters the quality of the pair.
Yeah, exactly.
From Peeke to McAvoy.
Yeah.
No disrespect.
No, exactly. Yeah, you're not trying to be not trying to be a dick. It's just like you just feel better about that, I guess.
Yeah, right. Okay, well that was a good talk on the lineup. One more thing before we get out of here on this pod today is breaking news this afternoon on the Bruins. You can go read about it at 985thesportshub.com, get Ty's thoughts on it. Zdeno Chara, who Don Sweeney had already said is going to have, a legitimate, like a defined role within the organization this year that they had yet to announce. They announced it today. Zdeno Chara announced as the hockey operations advisor and mentor for the Boston Bruins. I'm just going to read from the press release. In his new role, Chara will work closely with both players and staff to advise the organization in key areas. His primary responsibilities will include building relationships and strengthening communication between players and coaches, attending practices and home games, and providing off-ice development support to defensemen. He will also serve as a resource for the team's development staff and make periodic visits to connect with prospects at the AHL level. Now, I have no idea if Chara is going to be any good at this particular job, but it feels like he's good and tries his ass off and works his ass off at everything he's ever done. So I expect him to work his ass off at this role. And it feels like the Bruins could use a boost in the development department, in the communication department when it comes to coaches and players. It feels like they took a look at themselves internally and realized we need to do better here. And so they turned to a team legend to take care of that. This is a former captain. He was one of the great captains in the history of the team. He was arguably the best captain in the league while he was playing. And so I have confidence that he's going to be good at this role, Ty.
You should have confidence in that. I can tell you that speaking to players that have played with Chara, they tell me that this guy can do anything. Like they firmly believe that he can do anything. The funny story is that he was out injured once, and he was kind of going stir crazy because he was injured, and he was trying to work his way back. And what did he do? He went out and got his real estate license while being injured because he just wanted a new challenge, and he was doing that. And so, imagine Chara showing you an apartment. By the way, this is a beautiful 3-bedroom.
This doorway is good size for you, not for me.
I just love it. But no, like he speaks 5 languages, 6 languages. Like he's an absolute brilliant man. Like he is Tony Stark if he played hockey, it feels like at times. But no, what I'm curious about here is that how high are his aspirations? Does he want to be a team president? Cam Neely came back to the franchise in 2007, was the vice president. Now, his role as vice president was a lot of figurehead kind of stuff. It was a lot of, hey, we want your input. We know that you were a great player. Like, we want you to be, front facing, but also like, you're kind of an advisor. And then 3 years later, it's like, oh, you're the team president now. Like you are really good at this. We like what you're doing here. The team is on the rise since you came back, blah, blah, blah. Like we want you to be team president. Neely never said, no, I don't want to do that. He was like, oh, no, I want to do this. And so I just wonder if Chara has those same kind of aspirations, right? Like, or does he like being in, but on the periphery? Like, does he like kind of like, nah, I'm just here if you need ideas. I'm here if you need this. Like, I'm here if your younger player is having a tough time and he wants someone to talk to, or we got to get in his head about better training habits. Like, I think with Chara, I think what's important to note, Matt, is that he's not a guy who does anything half-ass. And so
that's what I mean.
Yeah. I just wonder, like, I wonder how high he wants to go. Yeah.
He's a whole asser.
He really is. No, but I like hiring him. I do, because I do think that like there are some guys that will benefit from getting, having Chara in their ear and telling him, how you are supposed to do things and how you're supposed to conduct things. And a very stupid example, and not that I truly give a shit about this at the end of the day, because it doesn't really matter. It shouldn't really matter all that much. But there was a time where we were waiting a long time for a player to speak to the media. And Chara came in and said, who are you guys waiting for? And we said who we were waiting for. And he came in with that player and goes, come on, they have a job to do. We all want to go home. Like, it's like, little things like that. Like, that's just kind of his personality of how he conducts himself as a leader and as a presence. And so I think having that kind of culture, I think it's good, especially for a team kind of at an organizational crossroads like the Boston Bruins right now.
Yeah, look, I think his aspirations got to be higher than just an advisor and mentor.
Yeah,
but that's an interesting. It's an interesting dynamic if he does want to be team president. Like, he's now the guy that's like lurking. He's like the Gerard Mayo lurking behind Bill Belichick. Hopefully, he's better at his job than Gerard Mayo was as head coach. But you know what I mean. Like, he's the guy sort of breathing down the necks of Cam and Dom, if they're on notice. Like, you could see Chara being a guy that rises up quickly through the organization. So I'm glad they have him aboard, and we'll see how it goes. But like, they definitely needed something. They needed some kind of infusion in the player development department, and as far as communication between coaches and players, like, they definitely needed to get their shit together in those departments, for lack of a better term. Okay, so I think we're going to call it a pod on that one, Ty. You got any closing thoughts for us today?
No. I mean, just my only one would be, if you saw the Lions today at practice, it feels like a Providence camp and Boston camp. Guy like Johnny Beecher, I really wonder. I wonder what's going to happen there. Did not have a great game on Tuesday. Did not have a great year a season ago. When you have Corrali back, I think Corrali is a better version of Johnny Beecher, as a speedy guy a lefty faceoff option who wins his draws and kills penalties. So what does that mean for a guy like Johnny Beecher? A 2019 first round pick, breaks through as a fourth liner, has one good year, and then kind of falls off the face of the earth. And so, you kind of look at who he's skating with right now. And, I use the term shadow realm. It feels like that's where he's kind of been banished to right now. And so I wonder what happens there. A guy like Lysell as well. What happens there? Does he get another game? Does he prove it? Some guys start slow, right? We have to acknowledge that. But when they don't bring in a PTO guy, and when they say, we want to give you guys the rope to get going, like, you got to start on time. You got to start right away. Because if you don't, okay, well, now the lineup's going to get more veteran heavy as we go along here, right? And Eyssimont had a great showing. Blumel had a goal. All of a sudden you look around, you're like, oh shit, we're behind the 8 ball here. Like, you don't have a lot of time in the preseason. It's 6 games, but each game gets more veteran heavy. And so if you're not going to show up on time, you're not going to show up ready to go. That's frustrating. And listen, I want these guys to succeed. They're first round picks, right? You can't flush more first round picks away via trade or picking the wrong guy. But it's a little frustrating when they're not showing up ready to go. There's no more excuses now for these guys. And so I hope they get a couple more games, but if they're not a couple more nothing burgers, that really sucks, because this is one of those situations where people like you and I spend all summer bitching about the team, saying, you got to give young guys a chance. You got to give young guys a chance. And if they don't show up, it's like, well, now I look like an asshole because you didn't show up and everyone's rooting for you. The whole team, the team catered it to you this offseason to make the team. And if you don't do it, it's kind of, that kind of sucks, I think. And so hopefully those guys get another game and they actually show something, because that's frustrating if you're not getting anything out of those players.
Yeah, I haven't really felt that strongly in that direction about Lysell in particular, where it's like, now he has to get a chance. Like, he hasn't quite shown enough in the times that we've seen him.
I thought he finished. I thought he finished well, though. He had 3 points in his final 4 games a year ago.
Oh, last year, yeah.
But you thought, okay, you're going to feel good coming into training camp and you're going to be undeniable, but it really hasn't happened. And there's only so many times you can sit there and go, well, the organization's not doing him any favors, and I do feel that way. But I thought this was a great chance for him at training camp. New head coach, new line mates pretty much across the board to show you something, and I just haven't seen it. And that's a little frustrating, because this is your first impression with a new head coach, right? And so you were hoping for a little bit more out of him through 2 games so far.
Yeah, I think him in particular, it's not entirely on the Bruins. But look, I would feel this way if it were like Mitten, Khusnutdinov, like if they were getting buried and we have to deal with, like Riley Duran, Patrick Brown, Alex Steves, like guys like that over guys like Mitten and Khusnutdinov. That would be very frustrating. But I think those guys are very close to earning spots, and I think you make good points about Blumel. I think he'll at very least be like one of their extra forwards, if not making the NHL lineup. All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode of the Sports Hub Underground. This is a podcast at 98.5 The Sports Hub. I'm not sure how familiar people are with it in the YouTube realm, speaking of the shadow realm. But we're trying to get more of these episodes up on YouTube, but you can get us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're more of an iPhone listener and you happen to catch us here and you want to listen on audio, you can get us there. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts. You can get an RSS feed at the website that we use on our new platform. But we always talk Bruins, and season's fast approaching, folks. So there's going to be plenty more hockey talk coming up. So thanks for listening, folks. We'll talk to you again soon.